As soon as I stepped inside the station, a sense of calm washed over me. The store's emergency lighting was on. The electricity was out, I guessed. However, that was basically the only odd thing. No blood, no bodies, just signs of life being paused. A half-eaten gas station sandwich on the counter. A few scratch lottery tickets in the trash by checkout. One had barely started to be scratched, still sitting on the counter. The shelves were practically untouched. They still seemed well stocked. The coolers also looked fairly well stocked still. I rushed to the water and pulled a core water from its place, immediately opened it, and chugged. I didn't realize how dehydrated I was until that very moment. Puking definitely didn't help retain bodily fluids. I found a backpack near the register. $45 price tag. What a ripoff. I scooped up as much water as I could. I plucked some Doritos and candy bars off the shelf as well as a few protein bars. You know, survival food. Honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never been in a survival situation before. The closest thing to survival I'd ever done was spending 3 days camping with my uncle when I was 12, and even then we had a truck 20 feet away and a cooler packed with hot dogs. I found a flashlight behind the counter, one of those oversized yellow ones every gas station seems to sell. I clicked it on. It worked perfectly. Of course it did. The apocalypse starts and suddenly every piece of equipment works exactly as intended. I tossed it in the backpack. The backpack still annoyed me. $45 for a backpack. I know I already mentioned that. Still, it bothers me. I wandered around the store for another few minutes, not because I was looking for anything in particular, I just didn't want to leave. Outside was uncertainty. Outside was blood. Outside was whatever the hell I saw back at the cemetery. Inside was fluorescent emergency lighting and stale coffee. Given the choice, I was leaning heavily towards stale coffee. There was a hot dog sitting on one of those rotating grills near the counter. It looked awful. Like genuinely terrible. Dry, wrinkled, still spinning under the heat lamp that probably wasn't even on anymore. I found myself staring at it, not because I wanted it, but because someone almost certainly was going to buy that thing. Some guy probably stopping at the gas station after work and thinking to himself, you know what sounds good? Gas station hot dogs. Then, whatever happened, happened. The hot dog remained. I don't know, for some reason that made me sad. The coffee pots were still half full. A radio sat behind the register. I immediately walked over to it. Nothing, just static. I messed with the knob, the antenna. Still nothing. Well, not nothing. There was the occasional burst of voices, a word here, half a sentence there, and then static. One station sounded like a preacher. Another like a news broadcast. One was just a guy yelling. Could have been important. Could have been somebody losing their mind. Hard to tell. I listened for a few minutes before giving up. The static was starting to get on my nerves. I checked my phone again. 13%. No signal. At some point, I was going to have to accept that repeatedly checking it wasn't helping. However, I was not at that point yet. I walked over to the front windows and looked outside. The gas station parking lot sat empty. The pickup truck remained where I'd found it, the nozzle still hanging from the fuel tank, the pump still running. The numbers had climbed quite a bit since I'd arrived. Somebody would be in for a rough surprise if society ever started working again. I chuckled, then immediately stopped, because the sound echoed through the store, and for a second I thought somebody else had laughed back. My heart nearly exploded. Turns out it was just me. The store was that quiet. I stood there listening. Nothing. No movement, no voices, no footsteps. Just the low hum of emergency lighting. The place felt frozen in time, like somebody had pressed pause. I found myself wondering how many people had been inside when everything started. The cashier, a couple customers, maybe somebody buying cigarettes, maybe an exhausted mom grabbing milk, maybe some teenager spending $20 on energy drinks and regret. Where did they all go? I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. The longer I stood there, the more comfortable the gas station felt. And that worried me, because it would have been very easy to stay. Lock the doors, eat the snacks, drink the water, pretend the world outside wasn't falling apart. The problem with that plan was simple. Eventually, I'd run out of food. Eventually, I'd run out of water. And eventually, I'd run out of excuses. Hardwick was still out there. Answers were still out there. Hopefully. Maybe. I don't know. But sitting in a gas station forever didn't seem like much of a future. So I tightened the straps on my newly acquired $45 backpack and headed toward the door. I paused before stepping outside, not because I heard something, not because I saw something, just because I realized that I was leaving the only place that had felt even remotely normal. Then I pushed through the half-open doors and stepped back into the night. The cool air hit me immediately. I hadn't realized how warm the gas station had been until I stepped outside. The parking lot was exactly how I'd left it. The pickup truck still sat by the pump. The gas continued flowing. The numbers on the pump kept climbing. At this point, I was beginning to think the gas station was the most functional thing left in town. That thought made me laugh, a short, dry laugh, the kind that isn't funny. I started walking again. Hardwick, somewhere ahead. That was the plan anyway, keep moving, keep looking for people, keep pretending I had any idea what the hell I was doing. The businesses became more frequent as I walked. Auto shops, fast food places, small office buildings, a furniture store that somehow managed to stay in business despite the fact that I had never seen a customer there. Actually, scratch that. Maybe they didn't stay in business. Maybe that's why I never saw anyone there. The roads were wider now. More lanes. The entire place felt abandoned, not destroyed, just abandoned, like somebody left in the middle of whatever they were doing. I passed a diner. The sign still glowed, open 24 hours. The parking lot was empty and one of the front windows had been shattered. I considered going inside, then decided against it, mostly because I was tired of investigating things. Every time I went looking for answers, I seemed to find new questions or dead people. Sometimes both. The smell from earlier had mostly disappeared now. At least the smell of blood had. Something else had replaced it. Smoke. At first, I couldn't place it. Then I started noticing it everywhere. A faint haze hanging over the road. The smell of burning wood. Burning plastic. Burning something. I looked toward Hardwick. The city lights seemed brighter now. Much brighter. Orange, too. At the time, I had convinced myself it was sunset, which was ridiculous. The sun had set hours ago. Still, I convinced myself anyway. The human brain will do some incredible gymnastics to avoid an uncomfortable conclusion, and mine deserves a gold medal. A few more blocks passed beneath my feet. The road gradually began sloping upward. Not much at first, just enough that I noticed. Then I saw it. The overpass. I don't know why it surprised me. I knew it was there. I'd driven over it hundreds of times, maybe thousands. It's one of those things you stop noticing after a while, like power lines or stop signs or that one weird guy who walks around town carrying a fishing pole. Never did figure that one out. Anyway, the overpass. It stretched above the highway like some giant concrete bridge leading directly into Hardwick. I could see cars littering the roadway leading up to it. Some looked abandoned. Others looked wrecked. One had somehow ended up sideways against the guardrail. I didn't even bother trying to figure that one out. At this point, I was done trying to make sense of things. I started climbing. The first few steps weren't bad. The next few were worse, and then they just kept getting worse. Whoever designed overpasses was an asshole. That's all I'm saying. You never really appreciate how steep they are until you're walking on one. Especially after spending hours wandering around while surviving exclusively on panic and gas station snacks. My legs felt like they were made of concrete. I found myself stopping every so often. Not long, just enough to convince myself I wasn't dying. Then I'd keep going. The higher I climbed, the farther I could see. The smoke became more obvious. Massive dark plumes stretched into the sky. I couldn't see exactly where they were coming from yet, just that they were there. A lot of them. I remember thinking there must have been a factory fire or multiple factory fires, maybe a refinery, something industrial, something explainable, something that wasn't the end of the world. I kept climbing. A few abandoned vehicles sat along the shoulder. One still had its door open. Another had luggage scattered behind it. Suitcases, clothes, a child's stuffed bear. The bear in particular bothered me. I don't know why. Maybe because it looked so normal. Everything else felt like disaster. The bear just looked forgotten. I stepped around it and continued upward. The farther I climbed, the quieter things became. Eventually, it was just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional groan of metal from the wrecked vehicles around me. I was maybe halfway up when I found evidence of people having been there recently. A small pile of empty water bottles sat behind a disabled SUV. A blanket, a few crushed snack wrappers. Somebody had been sheltering there or resting or hiding. I don't know. It was the first evidence I'd seen in hours that somebody living had made it this far. Oddly enough, it made me feel better than worse, because if they survived, where were they now? The climb continued. Eventually, the smoke smell became impossible to ignore. The orange glow grew brighter. The sky ahead looked wrong. I still kept making excuses for it. A power plant, an industrial accident, a wildfire. Literally anything else. Anything except what my brain was slowly beginning to realize. The last few feet of the overpass almost made me pass out. I can't remember the last time I had walked up such a steep incline. You never really think about how steep they are in a car. As I reached the top, I looked out into Hardwick. My eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing. I found my apocalyptic scene. Buildings ablaze, streets on fire, cars on fire. I knew the smell earlier wasn't a coincidence. I stood next to a car, taking in the view, when I heard a voice call out to me. "Hey, you there? Are you bit?" I turned to see a man, probably in his mid to late 40s. His hair was a shade of auburn turning into gray. I couldn't see the color of his eyes, though they appeared dark and piercing. He was slowly making his way from the opposite side of the overpass, maneuvering around the wrecked and pinned vehicles. I timidly called back, "No, but you are the first alive person I've seen. I've only encountered one of those things." But I ran away. He sized me up, deciding if I was being truthful or not. I had to assume. "Come this way, slowly." I walked slowly toward him, keeping my hands raised. I noticed he didn't have a gun, but he did have a rather large knife, though he didn't seem to know how to hold it well. As I got within about 10 feet of him, I got the jump scare of my life. Something came over the side of the overpass. At first, I thought it was another survivor. Then I saw its skin. The thing had landed on the man and drove him to the pavement before he could even react. Its hands pinned his arms. It lowered its head and sank its teeth into his face. I watched, stunned. It ripped away part of his cheek. Blood sprayed across the concrete. Muscle and tendons stretched from bone before finally tearing free. The man's scream only lasted a second, maybe two. Immediately, I ran past. I guess flight won out. As I got further away, I heard several animalistic screams. Then, more bodies began climbing over the sides of the overpass.